I would like to talk today about purpose. The Ari talks about in his teachings, as brought forth from the Zohar and from the sages, what is the purpose of creation? Why are we here? The Ari says that the entire purpose of creation, we can get a little glimpse as to what the purpose of life is if we look at Shabbat. Our sages say that Shabbat is a little taste of the world to come. Me'en olam haba. So if we want to know kind of what the purpose of creation is, the Ari says, look at Shabbat. Look at the Shabbat. Shabbat, if you can understand what the Shabbat is talking about, you can get a little taste, a little understanding of what we're here to do. So, what's Shabbat about? What's the essence of Shabbat? And before we get into that, think about, when you think about Shabbat, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For a lot of people, Shabbat is a day of rest. And for other people, Shabbat is family, friends. I mean, first thing that comes to mind, food, right? Challah. And so while all these things are very, very, very much connected with Shabbat, they definitely have to do with Shabbat. But if we want to take a deeper look, a common denominator. What do all these things have in common? What's like the mamash, like one essence, like the one thing that kind of describes Shabbat? So if we take a look at the Kiddush, we do Friday night, a cup of wine. And the Kiddush that we say, there's two blessings there. One blessing, Bore Pri Gefen, that's a lot, everybody knows that one. The second blessing that we make is a little bit longer, and it's actually talking about two major themes in Jewish history that we're remembering at the Kiddush, we're remembering on Shabbat. So if you can think, what are two major events in Jewish history that are worth remembering every Shabbat? One of them is creation. Remembering creation. Why remembering creation? Simple understanding, because God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day God rested. On the seventh day God rested, so we're resting. We're symbolically commemorating the day of rest, because God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day God rested. I don't want to get into whether those 6 literal days, not literal days. I mean, come on, science says 15 billion years. Do you really expect me to believe 6 days? Without getting too much into it, we start to learn Kabbalah, we start getting into the deeper aspects of what the Torah is talking about. 6 days can equal 15 billion years. No problem. How so? I mean, what do you measure? What's a day anyway? How do we know what a day is? So if you look at the definition of a day is the amount of time it takes for the Earth to revolve on its own axis. How long does that take? 24 hours. The amount of time it takes for the Earth to revolve on its axis, 24 hours. That's what we call a day. So how do we know what the day is? How do we know that the Earth is revolving? Because there are points of relativity. There's stars, there's sun, moon, things that are moving in the sky, right? I have points of relativity. What happens if I don't have these points of relativity? What happens if I don't have the stars and the sun and the moon and constellations moving around for me to know that I'm moving? How can I tell what time is? Much more difficult. So in the story of creation, Bereshit, the story in Genesis, do you know what day the stars and the moon and all the constellations were created? Day 4. Day 4. Only on day 4 are we actually able to tell time as we understand it, 24-hour periods. So what happened before then? Day 1, day 2, day 3. So you see, maybe exactly those days were not exactly 24-hour periods as we know it. So maybe they could have been a lot longer periods. But again, it's a whole different topic. I don't want to get into that. There is the second theme that we're talking about when we make the Kiddush. Coming out of Egypt. Exodus. Exodus. Da, 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 da. Movement of Jah people. Right? That's us. Jah people. Remember coming out of Egypt. We actually have a whole holiday that is remembering coming out of Egypt, right? Pesach, Passover. But why are we remembering Egypt, coming out of Egypt on Shabbat? What's the connection between Shabbat and Egypt? So, basic understanding is that in Egypt, once upon a time, our people were slaves. We were in bondage, and we came out of slavery. And the ultimate expression of freedom is Shabbat. Shabbat is the ultimate way to experience freedom. I mean, how so? What are we doing on Shabbat? Eat, drink, dressed up, beautiful clothing, have an amazing, amazing feast, inviting friends and family, and mamash, living like kings and queens. Can a slave get dressed up in beautiful clothing? Can a slave have a beautiful feast? Of course not. And so the ultimate expression of freedom is this idea of Shabbat. But we're not just commemorating some historical event that took place. For a lot of people, they think of Judaism and all of these kind of rituals as tradition, remembering historical events that happened, and then we're just kind of keeping the tradition going. The Kabbalah explains that there is way more going on behind this picture. The Kabbalah explains that actually the story of coming out of Egypt is actually a process that each and every single one of us is going through. The Kabbalah explains that actually all of the stories, all of the events, all of the characters written in the Torah, they're actually spiritual mappings of the soul. And that when we're learning about the Torah through the lens of the Kabbalah, we're actually learning about ourselves. We're going through this process of self-discovery. Because the Kabbalah says that each character is actually representative of a different attribute of my personality, of my consciousness. And that all of the events in the Torah are actually talking about different stages in my own personal growth and development. And the Kabbalah says that each one of us is going through a process of spiritual evolution. And that coming out of Egypt is not just something that happened 3,000 years ago, but it's something that the mamash that we're going through right now. That each and every single one of us is coming out of our own personal Egypt. So, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean to come out of Egypt? That it's not just something, that historical event that happened, that we have to see ourselves. So what does that mean? What does that mean today, North America, 21st century? What does that mean to be in Egypt? So, we take this idea of slavery. What does it mean to be a slave? I can be a slave with chains and whips and a taskmaster standing over me. But slavery can also be a little bit more internal. Today, if we look at our lives, if we were to ask ourselves, what am I a slave to? What am I a slave to? If I were to ask you, maybe you or maybe somebody you know, how many people here are slaves to money? How many people here are slaves to their job, to their boss, to their debt? How many people here are slaves to food? How many people here are slaves to Facebook? Truth. How many people here are slaves to their iPhone or their iPad? Something I. These are all forms of slavery, the Kabbalah says. That these are things that I can't do without. I can't do without. So much so that they control me. But not just the material things that I'm a slave to, but the Kabbalah says there are also much more fine forms of slavery, like slave to respect, slave to being accepted, slave to all kinds of personal appetites and urges. The Kabbalah is teaching us that each and every single one of us has to come out of all of this. We have to come out. We have to go past all of our personal shortcomings and to rectify our negative traits. This is called coming out of Egypt. It's called coming out of Egypt. until I can come to a place where I'm free, where I'm truly free. And so this story of coming out of Egypt, crossing the sea, standing at Mount Sinai, receiving the Torah, walking in the desert for 40 years, and then finally coming into the land of Israel. Again, these are all ideas that are actually talking about stages in my own personal life. Maybe we'll get to what does that mean, coming into the land of Israel. And when you think about it, what does that mean? If you know somebody who's ever immigrated to Israel, they want to move to Israel. What's it called? It's called making aliyah. What does aliyah mean? So aliyah in Hebrew means to go up. Now, I'm sorry. Last time I checked a topographical map, Israel was not the highest place in the world. So what does that mean to go up? So obviously we're talking about something much, much, much deeper. We're talking about a spiritual elevation. We're talking about rising up from a place, from one level of consciousness to another level of consciousness. Egypt represents a level of consciousness where I'm constrained. If you look at the word Egypt, in Hebrew is a very, 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 very deep language. That the essence of the word is actually within the word itself. So you say, how do you say Egypt in Hebrew? Mitzrayim. What does the word Mitzrayim mean? It comes from the word Meitzar, which means straight, confined place. That being in Egypt, being a slave, means being in a confined place. It means that I'm not free. I'm not free to be who I want to be. And that the Kabbalah and the Torah is trying to teach us how to come out of this place of confinement, to come into the land of Israel, come up to the land of Israel, to come to a place of freedom. That Shabbat is a little taste of what the world would be like if we were truly, truly free. Because if you look at everything that we do in Shabbat, the festive meal, family, friends, the resting, these are all expressions of freedom. Another form of slavery, the Kabbalah says, is when a person has a dream, has something that they so much have a passion for, but they're not able to fulfill this passion. They're not able to fulfill this dream. Why? Because I have a job, because I have bills, because I have to pay the rent, because that's life. That's life. There's a very, very deep teaching that already says that the human body is actually parallel to these different levels, states of consciousness. So you can say that when a person has something they really, really want to do. I mean, if you were to go back to when you were a child. We all had dreams. We all had things that we really, really, really had a passion for. And then slowly as we grow up, or our parents, or teachers, or society says, stop dreaming, grow up, or get a real job. And so slowly we start being pulled away from this voice that's inside of me, that's pushing me, kind of telling me where I need to go. I mean, if we're talking about the purpose, the Kabbalah says there are telltale signs when a person knows what they're here to do. Mamash, people think, wow, if I only knew what the purpose of life was, if I knew the purpose of my life was. Kabbalah says it's not that difficult. Do some self-reflection, take some time, and to try and identify those natural tendencies, those natural skills and abilities, and those things that I'm naturally drawn to. Kabbalah says these are very, very, very big telltale signs that this is what I'm here to do. Right? For somebody, maybe being an artist, musician, or for another person, an engineer or an architect. For somebody, it's medicine or a writer, or who knows. But these natural tendencies that I want to be, that I want to go after, these are very big telltale signs that this is what I need to do. So for most people, how many people do you know that are doing what they love? For most people, they have a passion, they have something that gives them joy and that they could do. They would do it without pay even. So why aren't they doing it? Because I need to pay the bills, because I have all kinds of different reasons that are preventing me. The Kabbalah says all these different reasons, it's called being in Egypt. So if we look at the human body, the Kabbalah says that the human body, the way we're built, is actually parallel to different aspects of our consciousness. If we look at our head, my head, I know what I should be doing. So why am I not doing it? Because in my heart, maybe I'm afraid, maybe I'm embarrassed. What are people going to say about me? The Kabbalah says this disconnect between my head and my heart is also being a slave. Between the head and the heart, you have the neck. Interestingly enough, the Kabbalah says Pharaoh. How do you say Pharaoh in Hebrew? Paro. Paro, if you take the letters and switch them around, you get the word ha'oref. Ha'oref in Hebrew means the neck. It means this area. It means that there is actually some force that's actually preventing my head and my heart from connecting, from me from truly fulfilling my own dreams, because maybe I'm afraid or all kinds of different reasons. But this inability for me to fulfill my purpose is also kind of being a slave. A person knows what they want to be doing, and they have this passion for something, and they can't do it. It's also kind of being a slave. This is a Hasidic story of a Jewish guy, Moshe, who lived in a small village in Poland, and he has a dream. In his dream, he sees the city of Vienna. And in Vienna, he sees a bridge. And in his dream, he sees that underneath this bridge, there's a treasure. And he has this dream, and it keeps reoccurring. And night after night, he has this dream. There's a bridge, and underneath the bridge, there's a treasure. And so he says, I'm going to go look for the treasure. And so he sets out on a long journey back in those days from Poland to Austria, and finally makes it to Vienna. And he's searching, and he finally finds this bridge that he's on his dream. And he wants to start digging for the treasure, but he sees there's a guard keeping watch. And he says, oh, it's a little dangerous for me to start digging in the middle of the day. The guard might stop me. And so he decides to wait until nightfall. The guard will go, and he'll start digging. So he waits till the night. He sees the coast is clear, and he starts digging underneath this bridge for this treasure that he saw in his dream. He's digging. All of a sudden, he feels somebody tapping on his shoulder. He turns around. The guard. What are you doing here? And he doesn't know what to say. He says, I'll tell him the truth. Can't hurt. So he says, I had a dream that there was a treasure underneath this bridge. And the guard starts laughing at him. He says, stupid Jew. You really believe in dreams? He says, I had a dream also. I dreamt that there was this guy named Moshe who lives in a village in Poland, that underneath the boards in his kitchen, there's a treasure there too. So what now? I'm going to listen to my dream and go and search for this guy named Moshe living in Poland to search for a treasure? Who listens to their dreams? Moshe hears this, that he said his name, the place where he lived. He understood. And he went back home as fast as he possibly could, and he opened up the floorboards underneath his kitchen, and he found the treasure. So this Hasidic story, we can learn a lot about the story. We can do a whole class just about this story. But one of the lessons we can learn about the story is that listening to our dreams. If each and one of us were to kind of do some really deep soul searching, kind of say, what do I have a passion for? What do I want? What do I want to do with my life? And try and push all of those pharaohs, all those voices inside of my head, all those little pharaohs, if there are parents or society or whoever saying you can't do that and that's crazy. And we were able to truly listen to our hearts. This is called coming out of Egypt. And Shabbat is a time where I'm able to put away all of those pharaohs, all those voices that are constantly making me distracted. I'm constantly running, without taking the time to truly listen, truly listen to myself. I want to take a little deeper look at another type of slavery. One of the most basic fundamental concepts in Judaism is this idea of tikkun olam, fixing the world, or repairing the world, healing the world, depends on how you want to translate it. But one of the fundamentals idea in Judaism, in the Torah, is this idea that the world is not the best place it can possibly be. And the Kabbalah explains that the world was created to be this place of ultimate peace and harmony. So, and that we have obligated ourselves to be this living example of justice and righteousness in the world. So what's wrong with the world? If we want to fix the world, one of the most basic questions we have to ask ourselves is, what's wrong with the world? I mean, how can you know what you need to fix if you don't know what's wrong? Right? If you don't feel well, you go to the doctor and you say, Doc, I don't feel well. If they're a good doctor, first question they're going to ask is, what's wrong? What do you feel? You have a broken iPhone or iPad or something, take it to the tech person and you say, it's not working. If they're a good tech person, they're going to say, what's wrong with it? So identifying the problem, because we said, basic understanding of the world is that it needs to be fixed. It doesn't take a genius to understand that the world is not the best place it can be. Anybody who's looked on the news in the last several thousand years, we see the world hasn't changed much, full of war and disease and suffering. Chaos. But the Kabbalah says that the world was created to be this beautiful, beautiful place. I mean, the word creation, in Hebrew, we say bria, it has the same root for the Hebrew word for health, bari. Bria, bari. In Hebrew, the words that have the same three-letter roots, they're very much connected. So the Kabbalah says the creation was created to be healthy. So what's wrong? If our job is to try and make the world the best place it can be, to be the living example of justice and righteousness, what's wrong with the world? So if we were to ask 100 people, what's wrong with the world, everybody would say something different. But we, again, want to look at the common denominator, something mamash like the root of what's wrong. The Ari says that the basic root of why the world looks the way it does is because man is too selfish. We're too busy thinking about ourselves. That there's not enough compassion and not enough altruism in the world. That we're just too selfish. How do most divorces start? Most divorces start with a cup of tea. How so? I come home after a hard day's work. I put my feet up on the couch and I just want to relax. And my wife sits next to me and she says, Alon, I could really use a cup of tea. If I say something like, I'm tired, I had a hard day, I don't feel like it, what am I really saying to her? I'm saying to her that right now, I'm more important than you are. That I love me more than I love you right now. And this selfishness is able to be applied into every aspect of the world, and we can see how are people to harm one another and to hurt one another. So this is also a form of being in Egypt. Kabbalah says if a person is only thinking about themselves, it's called being in Egypt. It's also called a sin. Kabbalistic idea of what's a sin? A sin when a person is doing something only thinking about themselves. And so the other side, a mitzvah. What's a mitzvah? For most people, they think of a mitzvah as a commandment. It's a very, very simple understanding of a word, but a deeper look at this word mitzvah is actually coming from the word savta, which means to connect, which means to actually give. I'm trying to connect to one another. It's not that I'm separating myself. Sin, separation. Mitzvah is connecting. This is also the Hebrew idea of love. What's love mean? So if you look at the Hebrew word for ahava, our sages say something very deep. It says if you have a Hebrew word, that each letter has a numerical value, and that if you have a word, a Hebrew word that has the same numerical value as another word, they're connected. Kabbalah says that the numerical value for the Hebrew word ahava, Hebrew word for love, ahava, is 13. Our sages say that that 13 is also the same numerical value for the Hebrew word for one, echad. That means love and echad are connected. What does it mean to love somebody? It means if I truly love somebody, I want to make them whole. I want to make them one. That inherently, the Kabbalah explains that we were all created with a lack. Each one of us is lacking something. And if I'm thinking about trying to fill my own lack, it's a form of selfishness, it's called a sin. And now I have a problem, because the Ari says that we're created with a lack, and that this lack is a cause for suffering. So I have a problem. So how can I fill my lack without filling my own lack? How can my lack get filled without being able to fill my own lack? Only if somebody else will fill my lack. This expression of filling somebody else's lack, giving them what they need, in Hebrew is called love. Ahava. Trying to make them whole. So he said, coming out of Egypt, coming out of this place of selfishness where I'm only thinking about myself. This all week long we're trying to work on ourselves. The Kabbalah gives us very, very, very specific ways for a person to be able to try and break his own selfish nature, to try and become more altruistic, to be able to love, to be able to be more compassionate, be more giving. And so on a Kabbalistic level, coming out of Egypt, all week long we're coming out of Egypt, trying to work on ourselves, trying to become more altruistic, more loving, and then hopefully finally coming to Shabbat, where Shabbat is a day where I can actually experience true selflessness, true altruism. Because if you look about it, what are we doing on Shabbat? Eating, drinking, family and friends. What are all these things that we're doing? If you think about them, that these very, very, very material things that we're doing, these very, very physical things, which don't seem so spiritual, they're actually very, very, very spiritual. Before I came to Israel, before I started to study the Torah and study Kabbalah, I used to live in India. I was studying Buddhism in a monastery in India, and in the East, the basic understanding is that, I mean, if anybody studied Buddhism, they know the Four Noble Truths. First noble truth: life is suffering. Life is suffering. And what is the cause of suffering? Attachment. In Eastern philosophy, it says that the root of suffering is attachment to the physical world, to the material world. And so if I want to try and reach enlightenment, I want to try to be a more spiritual person, I have to try and transcend my own physical desires, my own natural urges. And so I'm going to live a life of celibacy, a life of fasting and meditation, and trying to disconnect myself from the physical world. Interesting enough, in the East, that's the basic philosophy in the East. In the West, slightly different. What would you say is the main goal in Western philosophy? For most people, it's material possessions. The old saying goes, the money is the root of all evil, but we're still so much running after these material objects, material possessions. And so you have the East and you have the West. And right in the middle, you have Israel. And the Kabbalah says that it's not just coincidental that you have East and you have West and you have Israel in the middle. Right? If you look at any map, always North America is in the West and the Asia is in the East. And if you look in the middle, is Israel. It's called the Middle East. I don't know why it's called the Middle East. It should just be called the middle. But the Kabbalah says that it's not coincidental that the Kabbalah is also coming from the word. What does Kabbalah mean? It means to receive. But it also has another meaning. Kabbalah also comes from the word hakbala, which means parallel. The Kabbalah is teaching us that everything in the physical dimension has a spiritual counterpart. And so the Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy, and then right in the middle is Israel, that the Torah is the golden path, where it's saying that true spirituality needs to be connected to the physical world. Needs to be connected to the physical world. Judaism says it's easy to be holy sitting on the mountaintop, away from the world, contemplating God. Judaism says, the Kabbalah says, let's see you be holy sitting in rush hour traffic. Let's see you be spiritual when you have to change a screaming baby's diaper at 4 o'clock in the morning when you have an important meeting to go to soon. That Judaism says that this idea of spirituality must be connected to the physical world. Not only that, the Kabbalah says that actually true spirituality, true holiness cannot even be experienced without the physical world. And so we have this idea of being able to take the physical world, take the material world, and raise it up to a holier level. To take the very, very day-to-day mundane things and make them holy. Like eating and drinking. And so we have Shabbat. Shabbat is this day where we're feasting. Right? If I were to go back to my Guruji in India and say, Guruji, what's your typical spiritual day like? He'd say, fasting, meditating, contemplating God, nature of our existence. And he'd say, you're Jewish. What's your typical spiritual day? I said, well, one of the most spiritual days we have is Shabbat. And he'd say, okay, well, what do you do on Shabbat? I said, well, eat, drink, have sex, intimate relations. Can you possibly understand this? So, the Kabbalah is trying to teach us that taking these very, very material or physical ideas, eating, drinking, having sex. It's a mitzvah to have sex on Shabbat. Mitzvah to have intimate relations with your life partner. And that, how is Shabbat different than the rest of the week? So we say, being in Egypt, where I'm always thinking about myself. I'm eating for my own personal pleasure. Drinking for my own personal pleasure, right? Intimate relations, sexual pleasure, it's about me. I mean, think about it. What's eating like? How do we eat during the week? So I usually scarf down a burger, grab a bite here or there. You know, on Shabbat, the food is just an excuse. The food is just an excuse to bring people together. It's not about because I'm hungry. Shabbat, we're not eating because I'm hungry. And Shabbat, it's an excuse to bring people together. It's this form of altruism. Same thing with drinking, right? How do we drink during the week? If you've been to most college parties, ask people there, you know, why you're drinking. You don't have to. You don't have to be a genius to see that people are drinking for all kinds of different reasons. But on Shabbat, drinking is not because I want to forget or because I want to enjoy, but alcohol can actually be used to reach higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of spirituality. And the same thing with interrelations, with having sex. You guys have been in college. What's sex like during on a college campus? It's about me. It's about my own my own pleasure. But in Shabbat, it's not about me. If I've come out of Egypt all week long, I'm not thinking about my own selfish pleasure. What can I get out of it? But rather, what can I give? So this ultimate expression of freedom, where I'm actually doing very, very, very similar things. Eating, drinking, enjoying. but I'm not enjoying for me. I'm actually using them as a way to share with others. And I'm actually free from these very, very selfish, confining moments, motivations. So this is the idea of coming out of Egypt, trying to transform my selfishness into becoming more altruistic. And the Kabbalah is saying that if we really want to take a deeper look of where selfishness is coming from, because we said it's the root of what's wrong with the world. The Kabbalah says if you take a little deeper look as to where selfishness is rooted in. Where is selfishness coming from? The Kabbalah says something very, very deep. It says the root of selfishness, why are we only thinking about ourselves, is because we're not really able to perceive the ultimate nature of reality. We're not actually experiencing the ultimate nature of reality. So Kabbalah says, what's the ultimate nature of reality? The ultimate nature of reality is one of total oneness, total connectedness. Is that we're all connected. Like one body, that we're all different parts, but of one body. We're all connected. And this misperception of reality is what's enabling me to cause harm to another person, to hurt another person. Imagine somebody cutting a salad. Cutting a salad, you've probably cut salads before, you're cutting a salad and hand slips and you cut your finger. Have you ever seen anybody take the knife out of the hand that cut it and then in retaliation start stabbing the other hand? No sane person would do such a thing. Why not? Because it's all part of me. Why would I intentionally want to hurt myself? But yet the Kabbalah says the state of the world as we know it on the deepest level is as if one hand is stabbing the other hand over and over and over again. And this is called being in Egypt. The deepest idea of slavery, this mental slavery, where my level of consciousness is so low that I'm actually only just able to feel myself. And the Kabbalah is teaching us how to reach higher levels of consciousness, where I'm able to go beyond my own personal being and start to experience the true oneness of creation. This is called experiencing God. We get a little taste of this on Shabbat. Shabbat, the true freedom, is where I'm free from the misperception of reality. On Shabbat, I get a little taste of what the world would be like if we were all able to experience ultimate nature of reality, ultimate oneness. Ari says if we were able to experience this, automatically we would be filled with love, with compassion, with patience for all beings. And this is what we're trying to work for. This is a lifelong process that we're coming out of Egypt, coming out of slavery, trying to break free from the illusions of separation. Understanding that we're one. We're not the same, but we're one. Each one of us unique, each one of us different, each one of us beautiful, but all part of one whole. I have lots of friends that they study Chinese medicine. So in Chinese medicine, what does it mean to be healthy? What's a healthy body? Where all the different parts of the body, they are all doing their job, they're all doing what they need to be doing, and they're all working in harmony with the other parts of the body. The heart is the heart, the lungs are the lungs, kidneys, everything, everybody's doing what they need to be doing, and they're living in harmony with everybody else. The Kabbalah explains that also humanity also has to reach this level of understanding. That each one of us is unique, each one of us is special, beautiful, and that we all need to live in harmony with one another. But this harmony cannot be external. I can't just learn about it because it's still not, it's not the deepest of the deep. The Kabbalah is not only teaching us to understand this connectedness and this oneness, but it's also giving us tools. to be able to experience this true connectedness, this true oneness. A little taste of this true of oneness is Shabbat, is that if we've worked all week long trying to break free from our own selfish desires, our own selfish natures, trying to go beyond the illusion of the separate perception of reality, then when we get to Shabbat, we're able to get a little taste and to experience mamash this ultimate love and giving. And this is what the Ari is trying to teach us. The Torah is giving us tools to be able to reach us, not just to learn about it, but to actually experience it. This is what we're working towards. Hopefully, one day coming out of Egypt for good, and to be able to come into the land of Israel, come into a place of higher consciousness, where we're all able to experience ultimate unity, ultimate harmony, and because the Kabbalah says that this world is what we make of it. This world can be heaven. This world can also be hell. For a lot of people, they think heaven and hell is someplace after we die. But the Kabbalah says that Shabbat, a little taste of the world to come, Olam Haba. It says, don't say Olam Haba, which is like the world, the afterworld. But don't say Olam Haba, but Olam Sheba, Olam Haba, the world that is coming. It means that as long as the more we work on ourselves, the more we try to experience the ultimate nature of reality, ultimate oneness, that we're making this world what the world was supposed to be. And so this idea of heaven and hell, actually in Judaism, according to the Torah, the Kabbalah says that heaven and hell is actually the same place. How could heaven and hell be the same place? So there's a story of a guy who wanted to see what hell was like. And so he goes to the sage and he says, "Sage, I want to see hell." The sage says, "No problem, get in the elevator." They both get in the elevator, they go now to hell. Gets out of the elevator, what does he see? He sees a huge feast with like all the most like amazing food piled high on this table. Mosh, I think like Harry Potter Hogwarts feast. And he sees everybody sitting around this amazing table, and everybody's got a fork, but he sees nobody has elbows. And he sees everybody trying to eat from all this amazing, amazing food. And, they can't do it. You ever tried eating without elbows? Impossible. And he sees everybody trying to eat, and they can't do it. He says, "Oh my God, this is mamash hell, get me out of here." He runs back into the elevator and says, "This is hell, what's heaven like?" The sage says, "No problem." They go up to heaven. He gets out of the elevator. What does he see? The exact same thing. Same Harry Potter feast. Everybody's sitting around the table. Everybody's got forks. No elbows. But what's the difference in heaven? Everybody's feeding each other. So this story is trying to tell us that heaven and hell is the same place. It's right here. It's all about what we make of it. Are we going to continue to live our lives living in Egypt, continue to living life of selfishness, of egoism? Or am I going to take action to try and break free from my own personal enslavement and try to truly come to love, try to truly come to be more compassionate, to experience the ultimate nature of reality, ultimate unity, ultimate peace, and hopefully come to Shabbat, where hopefully my whole life starts to become one big Shabbat. I'd like to wish you guys Shabbat Shalom, that I hope we might take upon ourselves to make fixing the world, tikkun olam, to try and make ourselves the best we can possibly be, to try and take measures and actions to break free from this illusion of separation, to break free from all of our negative attributes, negative character traits, and to truly come to experience true holiness, true spirituality, true unity. Shabbat Shalom.